Hey everybody, it's Kyla. Welcome to my channel where I talk about the stock market and the economy amongst other things. Let's talk about what happened with the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve raised rates by 75 basis points. The reason that they're raising rates is because they want people to stop demanding things, make it more expensive for people to be alive so we can fight inflation. As I've talked about in several other videos, there's questions around is that the most effective thing to do to fight the inflation that we do have. But I want to talk about why the Fed did what they're doing and talk about the inflation that we do have, talk about the global consequences of all of this, and then talk about what could happen over the next few months or so. So the Fed's initial statement actually seemed pretty dovish. They talked about the cumulative effect of tightening monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity, and the impact that it's having on economic and financial developments. So they were like, hey, look, we know that we've been going pretty fast. We know that monetary policy works with a lag, which means it takes time to incorporate into the economy. And we know that it's been impacting things like the housing market. Like, we're aware of all of that. However, Jerome Powell highlighted this in his conference, in the press conference, that it's no longer about how fast the Fed is going. So it's no longer about 50 versus 75 per se, but it is about how high they're going to get rates and how long rates are going to remain high. So the Fed is likely going to slow down. So going from 75 to 50, but they're going to maybe keep on doing 50. So they're not going to go 75 each time, but they're going to keep on raising rates in order to battle inflation because they do not think that inflation is where it needs to be yet. Jerome Powell highlighted that he thinks the labor market is too strong based on job openings. Quits rates show that maybe the labor market isn't as strong as he might think. However, if you look at different employment reports, it does appear that the jobs market is still strong. It is questionable if that's the right thing to target, if targeting jobs and putting people out of work is really the best way to fight inflation. And I'll talk about potential solutions later on. We do have inflation. Everybody is very aware of that. There is now the issue of companies passing off price to cost to consumers. They've taken advantage of circumstances to expand profit margins, as the Financial Times reports. And that is something that the Fed raising rates might fix. Like, if people literally can't afford anything, companies have to stop raising prices, but you do have to begin to pay attention to the types of inflation that are happening. So some aspects of inflation were transitory. Supply chains have recovered. Companies have excess inventory now. So that's really no longer the inflation problem. However, if companies are raising prices, that is the inflation problem. So we're starting to see somewhat of a shift in the type of inflation that we do have. Also, different politicians are speaking out, which, why aren't they working on, helping the Fed? I'm not sure, but Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, Hickenlooper have all said, hey, Fed, you need to slow down. This is going to hurt people more than it's going to help them. I will talk a little bit about supply side policies and how politicians can actually help versus just writing letters. Then the Fed, as I talked about previously, they are sacrificing jobs. So the Fed has a dual mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Right now, they're going after price stability in order to have maximum employment later on. So they think that by fixing inflation now, that we can have jobs later on. They're not very happy with the state of the consumer because the consumer is a little too strong for them. Esther George, who is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, said, "We see today that there's a bit of savings buffer still sitting for households that may allow them to continue to spend in a way that keeps demand strong, and that suggests that we may have to keep at this for a while." They're very concerned with what consumers are doing and the power that consumers have to spend. So for the Fed, they do want to see some more weakening for consumers. They do want to see people not being able to spend as much money, not having that flexibility, and they're also paying attention to the stock market. Jerome Powell was told that the market had reacted positively to the news. The market thought that the Fed was going to slow down, and Jerome Powell made it very, very clear that the Fed is not slowing down. The Fed has to anticipate what the market is anticipating based on expectations about Fed anticipations, or on market anticipations about inflation expectations based on Fed action. And we are starting to see financial conditions tighten. Parts of the yield curve have inverted, and also the market is pricing in a higher terminal rate, which means that they're pricing in smaller rate hikes, but a higher peak rate for Fed funds. So what that means, because it's a little confusing, what that means is that the market thinks that the Fed is going to keep on hiking. The Fed is being clear that they're going to keep on hiking, but it's not going to be 75 basis points each time. Rather, it could be 50 or 25. However, we're going to see a Fed that continues to hike into a slowing economy. And there's also global consequences. When asked about global consequences, Jerome Powell was like, hey, listen, 2% inflation is good for the world here in the United States. 2% inflation is what we're going to do. If it creates a stronger dollar, which it will if they keep on raising rates in order to get to 2% inflation, that is the consequence. The Fed, he was like, hey, we're going to be restrictive. We're not at restrictive yet. Restrictive means essentially, getting into an economic downturn, a little flavor of a recession. They're going to want to restore price stability. They think the labor market is still very tight. They think that it'll all take time. There's uncertainty about how long it'll take, when it'll happen, but it's very premature to think about pausing. The failure of tightening enough is riskier than over tightening because they can always slow down again, is what Jerome Powell highlighted yesterday. It does seem like there's internal internal divergence within the Federal Reserve. I would imagine that some people are a little bit more dovish than what Jerome Powell came across as yesterday, just based on the difference between the statement, which was inherently like, hey, listen, like, things are pretty wild. That was very Brainerd that we saw in the statement, who is the vice chair of the Fed. However, Jerome Powell very clearly does not want to slow down, and that he thinks that they're going to keep on going, they're going to keep on going, they're going to keep on going. However, the type of inflation that we do have, this is not like going to fix, like, it's not going to fix it. It's not going to fix it. Raising rates is not going to magically fix all the problems that we have. We have to have supply side solutions like renewable energy, denser housing, fixing the shrinkage of the labor supply with proper immigration policy. So Vox had a great article about this. It's really about how do we sort of reinvest in the future, make sure that things don't always end up with just like hitting it with a hammer. How do we make sure that the hammer is a little bit more targeted so not everything becomes a nail with regards to hitting it on the head? So S&P 500 companies are spending the most on buybacks and dividends that they ever have. So we're starting to see a lack of investment in companies. There's a bunch of layoffs happening right now in the tech firms, but there's still a lot of pressure in the labor market for hiring people. So it's a very strange economy right now. However, the Federal Reserve is going to keep on raising rates. The main takeaway is that they're going to keep on raising rates in order to fight inflation. But the question is that the right thing to do with the inflation that we have? I will be writing about this on Saturday. So Kyla.substack.com. So go ahead and hit subscribe there. This is podcast. This is YouTube, as well as the newsletter is, and as well as on here. So if you want to go ahead and hit subscribe to all of those things, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. But I hope you're doing okay, and I will talk to you all soon. Goodbye.